Dealing with feedback is an essential part of being a mixing engineer. It can also be a challenge, in particular when it comes to ego. In this video, I'm going to go over the top 3 mixes in my mixing competition and also give some feedback. So I thought this was a great opportunity to share some thoughts that I have on receiving and giving feedback. So it should come to no surprise to anyone that music is extremely subjective. The same applies to mixing. Our tastes are extremely different when it comes to this. When you're working as a mixing engineer, you are providing a service to someone. And when you are doing that, it's easy to have a mentality that the customer is always right. At the same time, these people are coming to you for your expertise, so your opinion should mean something because you're, after all, an expert, right? So how do you then balance your expertise versus the customer's opinion if they don't match? I've tried to illustrate it with these images. Here I have drawn a line. This line represents your vision with a mix. It can be how bright the kick drum is, how loud the snare is. When you're on this line, it's exactly how you envision the mix without any other input. So this is like your North Star when mixing, right? But of course, since music is subjective, the desired result may not be exactly on this line that represents your vision. The band's vision can be different. So if you're looking at this image instead, I have drawn a zone that is emerging from your vision. So it's deviations. Maybe the kick drum should be slightly darker according to the band. The snare drum should be slightly lower in volume. This zone essentially represents the amount you're willing to deviate from your vision without it feeling off to you. Here I have an example. If the band is exactly on your vision, then it's all good. It's a dream collaboration, right? You have the exact same vision for how the kick drum should sound. You have the same vision for what the guitar tone should be. The feedback process here is not to be discussed because, yeah, there is no feedback because it's exactly on your vision. A more realistic example is that it will look something like this, though, that the band is not exactly on your vision, that they have different preferences. In this example, it's still within the zone that I am feeling comfortable deviating from my vision with a mix. In these cases, I always take the feedback, I say thank you, and I just make the changes that the band asks for. Because it's still so close to my vision with the mix that I won't fight for keeping it exactly on my line, so to speak. There is something to be said for keeping harmony in projects, so not taking every fight, but now is when it becomes interesting. Say the band is over here, so now what they want from me is far away from my preferences, from my vision with the mix. It's outside of the zone of comfort, so to speak, where I still feel like my style of mixing is being honored in a way. And why is this important? Because it's important to separate your ego from this, just feeling hurt by criticism, especially when criticism is brought forward in a negative way. That can be hard. That takes practice. In some cases, it's not making the mix worse. In some cases, it's even making it better. So you need to stay humble to that, okay, my vision, maybe it wasn't completely 100% right from the beginning, but actually that the band are a bit outside of it is really cool. But what I've tried to illustrate here is when they are completely off, according to my personal preferences as a mixer. So what this can look like is that the band maybe wants 3 decibels more bass on the master and making it super dark. Like my preferences are bright mixes, for instance. But yeah, the dark sound, it's also a cool sound. It's not objectively worse or better. It's just my personal preferences is for brighter mixes. So say a band wants a really dark mix, or they want like the rhythm guitars 3 decibels too loud, in my opinion. This is the area that I think comes into the expertise side of things. It's my job as an engineer to make sure that no elements are sticking out too much, so that they are keeping in line with what is considered modern production, so to speak. So if a band comes with feedback that lands outside of this zone, I'm going to have a discussion with them about it. I'm gonna say, okay, I disagree, and here is why. And either they agree with me or they are adamant and stay with their opinion. So they still want this change to be made. At that point, I don't fight them anymore. At that point, I take the mentality of that the customer is right. I make the changes. However, I will think about doing more projects with this band. And this may go against the opinion of some engineers, like, oh, you should take all the jobs you can in the beginning. You should just try to keep the customer as happy as possible. That's one way to look at it. The way I see it is that the kind of work you put out there, it's the kind of work you're going to get moving forward. So if I put out a really dark sounding mix and another band hears it and they really like that kind of sound, they're gonna come to me and say, oh, we want a mix just like this one you did. If it's a style of mix that I don't personally enjoy, both I'm gonna be miserable while mixing it, and also I don't think I'm going to get my full potential into this song. I think it would be better if they go to a mixing engineer who specializes in this sound and enjoys it. That's the reason why I think you should be at some point a bit picky of who you work with as an engineer, because it's in a way defining what kind of sound you're going to be working with moving forward. So with that said, now I'm going to get into the mix competition that I held a few months ago. How the process was that I decided the top 3 contenders, and then the band SHIVA, they decided the winner. So I had no say in which one was the winner. But I can speak from personal experience that it's really hard to not win out when it's like a mix-off or a mixing competition. Then it's really important to remember what I talked about before, that it's extremely subjective. My vision line will not be the same as anyone else's. So yours might be outside of my zone, so to speak. And that's totally fine. So when I'm now giving feedback to these top 3 mixes, it's how to get closer to my ideal vision line, so to speak. It's extremely subjective. It's not objectively true. So yeah, with that preface, now let's get into it. All right, let's start with the 2 mixes that didn't win. And there we have Emil and Dave. So starting with Emil's mix, it sounds like this. And comparing to my mix of the song. So what I hear when listening to this mix is that it's really, really well balanced. All of the elements volume-wise sound really good. What is sticking out to me is mainly that the kick drum is a bit too clicky, so listen for it here compared to my version. So here I have an EQ, which shows how I would change the sonic spectrum a bit to better fit, my vision for a mix. Let's add a bit of bass here. Some boxiness. And also some top end. I also feel like it could do with a bit more energy, so slightly more compression, I would say. Now let's go over to Dave's mix. Compared to Emil's. And compared to mine. In my opinion, this mix has a bit more energy to it, which I really like. Let's see here. What I've done is just removing a lot of harshness because I thought that it had too much high mids, so it's mainly this stuff. A challenge with this mix is keeping all the elements audible while still getting this super heavy and saturated sound. I think this really has a saturated and cool tone. It's just the definition is missing a bit, so I would dial back the saturation slightly maybe. Now let's get into the winner, which is Patrick Hacksteiner. Congrats, Patrick, and this is how it sounds. So why the band chose this mix, they told me, was because of the energy mainly. Of course, there are still things to improve about this mix, but yeah, the overall impression is that it has really good energy according to the band. This being said, I'm sure that some of you watching are preferring one of the other two mixes over the winning one, and that's exactly my point of this long ramble before getting into this, that it's extremely subjective. That's why I didn't want to have the final say. I wanted it to be up to the band, so it's like a real mix-off in the real world. And sometimes when you lose in a mix-off, the only feedback you get is, yeah, we like the other mix more. And you have to be able to accept it. But yeah, at least here we got some real motivation from the band. Now let's see what we can improve about this mix. I'm lacking some definition in the guitars mainly. I think the gain is a bit high on them. I think that, like the band says, the energy is super good. Here I've changed some stuff. Let's see. I've added some smack here to the snare drum. I have removed some mud here. Boosted some mids to make the vocals a bit more forward. Let's have a listen. Let's compare it to my mix. If I could combine these three mixes into one, we would have an even better one for sure. But yeah, I'm really impressed by you guys. What really stands out to me is that Emil's mix has the most definition. I think that Dave's mix has the best energy. I think that Patrick's mix also has great energy, but mainly it's like that it sounds way more full. It sounds very well balanced frequency-wise. If you have any feedback for the mixes of the guys, leave them in the comment sections. Just be sure to be constructive and be kind.